On the morning of August 14th, 2010, police in Surrey walked into a quiet family home and froze. A 61-year-old man lay motionless on the kitchen floor. His head was covered. His body was still warm. And beside him, investigators found a handwritten note from his wife, a note that simply said, "I love you." Sally, before officers could even process the scene, a second emergency call came in. The same woman they believed had killed her husband was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. And when rescuers finally reached her, what she told them made every single person ask the same question. Wait, what? This was not a stranger, not an intruder, not a robbery. This was a wife who had lived with her husband for more than 3 decades. A wife who had cared for him, loved him, raised 2 sons with him, and yet overnight something inside her snapped. Something so powerful that she picked up a hammer and used it again and again until the man she once adored was gone. If you are new here, subscribe. We look at the cases that shake families, courts, and entire countries. And this one is going to stay with you long after the video ends. This is the case of Sally and Richard Challen, a marriage that looked normal from the outside, a marriage that was rotting from the inside, and a discovery that pushed a woman past the point of no return to understand what happened in that house. You have to go back to the beginning, long before the police tape, long before the cliff, long before the hammer. Sally met Richard when she was barely out of school. She was shy, soft-spoken, eager to love and be loved. Richard was older, confident, charming in a way that made people stop and listen. He knew how to command a room. He knew how to make a young girl feel chosen, and Sally fell for him fast. Their relationship did not grow slowly. It swept her up. Within months, she was no longer the girl she used to be. She was the girl he wanted her to be. Friends noticed. Her mother noticed. Everyone around her saw it. The way Richard corrected her every time she spoke. The way he watched her when she walked into a room. The way he made her feel guilty for things she did not even do. But he always came back with affection. One moment he was cold and distant. The next he was holding her hand and promising he loved her. It was confusing. It was intoxicating. And for a young woman who had never been loved like that before, it was enough. They married. They had sons. They built a life that looked stable on the surface. But behind closed doors, the cracks were already there. Richard dictated everything. What she wore, who she spoke to, how much money she spent, when she could leave the house. And whenever she questioned anything, he would pull away from her emotionally until she begged for his attention again. This was not a heated marriage. This was control, slow, quiet, invisible to the outside world, but devastating on the inside. And then came the part that destroyed whatever pieces of trust Sally still had. The cheating, the secrecy, the messages, the other women. The night everything changed did not begin with shouting. It began with silence. Richard had fallen asleep in the living room with his phone beside him. To most people, that is nothing. To Sally, it was the one thing he never allowed. Richard guarded his phone like it was a second life. He kept it in his pocket when he showered. He slept with it under his pillow. He never left it unlocked, ever. But that night something slipped. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was careless. Maybe he believed Sally was too broken down to question anything anymore. But he fell asleep with the phone unlocked, screen glowing, messages open. Sally did not go looking for trouble. She went to turn off the light, and then she saw a name she had never seen before. A woman who called him love. A woman who told him she missed the things he did to her. A woman who said, "I wish your wife knew the truth about you. It would break her, but she deserves it." Sally froze. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. One message after another. Pictures, plans, nights he said he was working. Nights he said he was tired. Nights he said she was the reason he needed space. She scrolled and scrolled and scrolled, searching for a lie that would make everything make sense. But the truth only got darker. There were other women, not one, not two. Multiple conversations going back, months, maybe years. All while he told Sally she was the problem. All while he made her feel like she was losing her mind. It was not just cheating, it was humiliation. cruel words, manipulation, mockery behind her back. And in that moment, at 3:30 in the morning, looking at the man she had loved since she was a teenager, something inside her cracked in a way she could not glue back together. She realized she had been living with a stranger. She realized every instinct she had swallowed for years had been right. She realized she had given her entire life to someone who treated her like she was invisible. But the worst part, the part that shattered her completely, was a single message he sent to another woman. He wrote, "She will never leave me. She is too weak. She will break before I do." Sally could not sleep. She sat in the living room for hours staring at the phone. Every message burned like acid in her mind. Every picture felt like a betrayal carved into her soul. She tried to reason with herself. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I am imagining it. Maybe it is not as bad as it seems. But deep down, she knew. She knew she had been ignored. She knew she had been manipulated. She knew she had been humiliated quietly, silently, over years. She thought of all the nights she had stayed awake, waiting for him to come home, hoping he would smile at her, hoping he would say he loved her, hoping he would be the man she married. And then she thought of all the lies, all the excuses, all the women she had never known about. And in that moment, something shifted. It was not a sudden explosion. It was a cold, calculated realization. I cannot live like this anymore. I cannot keep giving my life to someone who does not value it. I cannot keep loving a man who does not love me back. She thought about leaving, divorcing him, moving away, starting over. But those options seemed too slow, too uncertain, too weak for the storm raging inside her. The night dragged on, the clock ticked toward morning, and she made a decision she never thought she would make, but one that would change everything forever. She would confront him, not with words, not with tears, but with action. And when morning came, nothing would be the same again. Sally did not act in a frenzy. This was not a crime of passion in the heat of the moment. This was a mind that had been pushed to the edge, calculating each step, each second. She spent the night planning silently, watching him sleep. Every movement, every breath, every snore became part of the calculation. She thought about the hammer in the garage. She thought about the best place to strike. She thought about leaving no one to save him in time. The idea terrified her, yet in her mind it felt inevitable. For years she had been trapped in a marriage that made her feel invisible, small and powerless. And now she saw a way to reclaim control, to make him pay for every lie, every betrayal, every sleepless night. Her heart pounded, yet her hands were steady. The silence of the house pressed down on her. She imagined the neighbors, the police, the boys, and yet she did not hesitate. The years of humiliation had built a storm inside her chest, a storm that demanded release. She rehearsed it quietly in her head. One strike, two strikes. Make sure he does not wake. Leave a note, then disappear. By 4:30 in the morning, the plan was set. Everything she needed was in place, and she knew there was no turning back. This was the point of no return. A life she had devoted to another would end in her hands. A love she had given everything to would become a memory forever stained. Sally's mind was clear, cold, and ready. The man she had once loved would never hurt her again. And as she moved toward the bedroom, each step echoed in the house like a drumbeat of destiny. Richard was still asleep when Sally entered the bedroom. The soft rise and fall of his chest mocked the years of lies, the nights of hurt, the constant betrayal. She paused for a moment, looking at the man she had once called her world, a man who had smiled at her wedding day, who had held her in the hospital when she gave birth, who had promised he would never leave. But promises had been broken, trust had been shattered, love had been replaced with cruelty and deceit. Sally's hand found the hammer she had retrieved from the garage. It was heavier than she remembered, cold and solid, a weapon she had never imagined holding in such a way. She took a deep breath, a shudder passing through her body, and whispered under her breath, "This ends now." Then she struck. The first blow hit him with a sickening thud. Richard stirred slightly, confusion flickering in his face, but he did not fully wake. The second strike came faster, mercilessly, fueled by years of pain and betrayal. Time seemed to stretch and contract. Each strike carried every insult, every lie, every secret he had hidden from her. Sally did not hesitate. The man she had loved was gone in front of her eyes. The room smelled of iron and fear. The silence of the house was broken only by her ragged breaths. When it was over, she stood there staring at him. Her body shook, her heart raced, yet a strange calm settled over her. She picked up a pen and a piece of paper and wrote simply, "I love you, Sally." A note to explain, or perhaps a note to remind herself of the love she had once felt. Then she left the room, carrying the weight of everything she had done. She stepped into the morning light, knowing the world she had built was forever changed. When the police arrived at the house, they were met with silence. The kind of silence that presses down on your chest makes your stomach turn. Neighbors had called after noticing the house unusually quiet that morning. No cars leaving, no sounds of breakfast, no life. Officers entered and found Richard on the kitchen floor, his body lifeless. The note beside him was simple, chilling in its tenderness, "I love you." Sally herself was nowhere to be found. Minutes later, reports came in of a woman standing at the edge of a cliff nearby. It was her, Sally Challen, distraught, trembling, ready to end her own life. She was approached carefully by a chaplain and officers. Her words were calm, almost eerily so, as she confessed what had happened inside the house. She did not scream, she did not plead. She simply said, "I could not live like that anymore. I had to make it stop." Investigators would later describe the scene as one of the most disturbing cases of domestic breakdown they had ever seen. Not because it was violent, though it was. Not because it was tragic, though it was, but because of what had led to it. Years of emotional abuse, years of manipulation, years of betrayal and secrecy. When questioned, Sally explained the discovery of Richard's messages to other women, the lies, the manipulation, the emotional torment. She spoke about the crushing weight of isolation and fear, and how it had built inside her like a storm she could no longer contain. Her sons were left in shock. Neighbors were left speechless. The world outside could not fathom how the woman who had been so loving and devoted could commit such a violent act. But for Sally, it had been a breaking point decades in the making. Police immediately began piecing together what had happened. The hammer, the note, the timing, all of it told a story, but not the full truth. They interviewed neighbors, friends, and family, trying to understand Sally and Richard's life together. From the outside, the marriage looked normal, quiet, polite, ordinary. But interviews revealed cracks, long ignored. Sally had been controlled, isolated, humiliated quietly over decades. Friends described how Richard would monitor every interaction, every purchase, every word she spoke. Her social life was minimal, her confidence shattered, her identity eroded, and the police learned about the messages, the affairs, the deceit. It painted a picture of a life trapped in a prison of love turned cruel. Forensic teams analyzed the scene, blood spatter, the placement of the hammer, the note. It all confirmed what Sally had confessed. She had planned it, calculated it, executed it with precision born of desperation. Psychiatrists were brought in. They assessed Sally's mental state. Years of coercive control had left her vulnerable to extreme actions. Her mind had been manipulated, her emotions twisted, until reality itself became unbearable. When the case went to trial, the world watched in disbelief. Some saw a cold-blooded murder. Others saw a woman who had been driven to the edge by abuse and betrayal. The court had to decide, was this murder, manslaughter, or something in between? The trial was unlike anything the community had ever seen. Every detail of Sally and Richard's marriage was laid bare in court. The emotional abuse, the isolation, the lies, the infidelities. It all came flooding out. Witnesses testified about Richard's controlling behavior, the fear in Sally's eyes, the years she had silently suffered. The prosecution painted a picture of a premeditated murder. They described the hammer, the note, the planning, and argued that no matter the circumstances, Sally had taken a life. But the defense focused on years of coercive control. They argued that Sally had been trapped, manipulated, psychologically tormented, and that her mental state had been destroyed by Richard's behavior. Experts spoke about coercive control, about how it can break a person slowly over time, about how isolation and manipulation can warp perception and push someone to a point of no return. The jury listened, sometimes in disbelief, as the reality of the abuse became impossible to ignore. Throughout the trial, Sally remained composed. She did not cry on command. She did not plead. She simply told the truth as she remembered it, in her voice, steady but haunted. Every detail she shared reminded everyone that love, when twisted by betrayal and cruelty, can become deadly. In the end, the court had to weigh decades of manipulation against the act itself. The decision would change Sally's life forever. After weeks of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The courtroom was tense, every observer holding their breath. Outside, the media waited, cameras flashing, capturing the anxiety of a case that had gripped the nation. When the verdict was finally announced, the room fell silent. Sally Challen's murder conviction was quashed. Instead, she was found guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The court recognized the impact of years of coercive control, emotional abuse, and manipulation. Her actions were deliberate, yes, but her mental state had been destroyed by the relentless torment she endured. The judge described the marriage as one of quiet cruelty and slow psychological erosion. He said that for decades, Sally had been trapped, invisible, silenced, and that this abuse had led to the tragic events of that morning. Outside the court, reactions were mixed. Some felt justice had been served. Others were shocked, unable to reconcile the violence with the leniency of the ruling. For Sally, it was a moment of relief, but also a reminder of the life she had lost, the man she had loved, and the years she would never get back. The case became a landmark in raising awareness about coercive control, changing how courts in the UK approach domestic abuse cases, and inspiring legislation to protect victims before tragedy strikes. Looking back, the story of Sally and Richard Challen is more than just a murder case. It is a story of love twisted into control, of devotion broken down by lies, of a life lived quietly in fear until one woman reached the end of her rope. Sally's actions shocked a nation, but they also forced the world to look at domestic abuse in a new way. Not just the bruises that can be seen, but the invisible scars that last a lifetime. Years of manipulation, isolation, humiliation, and betrayal can push even the strongest person to the edge. And sometimes the edge is a place from which there is no return. For families, for partners, for anyone in a relationship, this case is a warning. Listen to your instincts. Watch for the small signs. Protect yourself. And never ignore the quiet suffering that might be happening behind closed doors. If you are watching this, I want you to comment below. Tell me your thoughts on this case. Tell me where you are watching from. Do you think Sally's actions were justified? Could anyone survive years of abuse and betrayal without breaking? Remember to subscribe. We cover cases that shake the heart, the mind, and the world. And this story, tragic and shocking, is one that will stay with you long after you close this video. Some stories are meant to horrify, some are meant to teach, and some, like this one, are both. Sally and Richard Challen's story is one of love, betrayal, control, and the devastating consequences when it all collapses.